Hey everyone, welcome to the Zest, the official podcast of Orange Coast Magazine. I'm Chelsea Rainieri, and today's guest is a trail race director of more than 11 races, a running coach, nutritionist, and a former Team Patagonia ultrarunner. She's also the founder of KHRaces and puts on some of the most popular and hardest trail races and ultras in Southern California that attracts racers around the globe, including my husband. Thank you so much for being here today, Keira Henninger.
Oh, thanks for having me, Chelsea. I'm so honored. This is awesome.
Of course. Yeah. So my husband actually did the Ray Miller race last year and he finished, I think, like top in his group. But as a spectator, I had so much fun. It was such a beautiful course. And I loved like that you guys had like massages ready for the runners afterwards. I like signed them up really quickly. Like it was great.
Oh, that's so awesome. You know, a lot of people don't realize that the trail running community is so tight knit and we really are just like really close. So I love that you saw that experience and absorbed that experience. And it's awesome.
The energy was so great. And he was telling me that you guys had to set up the night before and there's like mountain lions or stuff like that when you had to. That's crazy.
Yeah, they had come through the campground. And I mean, I've been running on trails pretty much my entire adult life. And I spend most of my time alone in the wilderness. It's like my mental medicine. And so I have absolutely seen mountain lions and they're more prominent. I live in Orange County, obviously. So they're definitely more prominent like in Orange County than other places. It's pretty wild. A lot of people don't realize.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. We're dealing with coyotes in Irvine, so I can't even imagine taking it to the next level of mountain lion. But okay, so you grew up in Temecula. How did you first get into running?
So I ran in high school, but prior to that, really, I fell in love with running in junior high. It was like sixth grade. And so I guess it would have been like 1988. And they started making us run the mile in PE. And for me, it immediately became something that I loved and I wanted to beat all the boys. And I was really the only girl in the PE class that was, up there running with the boys and loving it. And we had, in seventh grade, we had a cross country team at my junior high, but it was only boys. And so I went to the principal and asked if I could run on the team and they let me run on the team. And so for seventh and eighth grade, I was the only girl that ran on the team.
So that's so cool.
Yeah, that's really how I got into running. And of course that was I had a really awful childhood. So for me, it was an escape. And I think when you come from a really bad childhood, you either turn to all the bad things or you become like obsessively, compulsively driven and find something else. And luckily for me, it was the latter and been the latter my whole life. So yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Do you remember what your mile time was when you were in middle school?
Yeah, I do. 6 minutes and 3 seconds.
Oh my God. My fastest time in middle school, I think was 8 minutes, maybe 9.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you graduated from Cal State Fullerton with a degree in leadership. And I actually took a couple of leadership classes at Chapman and they were some of my favorite. You learned so much about prominent leaders. And one of my favorite takeaways was that I think in like your early 20s, you have this idea of like, okay, by the time I'm 30, I'm going to be super established and like, I'm going to be a leader. But learning about these really famous leaders, it took them years to get to the point where we know who they are now. So what were some of your biggest takeaways from that major?
Oh, I love that you just said that. Really, it's been a lifetime for me. So I started in leadership in junior high and high school. I was in ASB, went into college, went into graduate school, organizational leadership, business leadership. And for me, the biggest takeaway and the thing that has stayed with me to this day is really people skills and learning to love and embrace all people and being able to work with every walk of life, every personality. And I think people underestimate what an incredible skill set that is.
Yeah.
And in my business, I deal with so many state parks and U.S. Forest Service and county parks and city officials, and everybody's different. And you have to just learn to fall into their groove and go with the flow and bob and weave. And that's really the biggest takeaways that I learned from leadership that I use every single day of my life, is to embrace all people, learn how to work with their vibe and go with the flow. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. That's honestly it is a really hard, it's a good skill to learn, but it's also challenging to get to that point. How do you deal with, or how do you work with people who are a higher authority figure I don't know why I have like I'm still struggling with that still, like being intimidated by someone because of their authority. I don't know what that's from. How do you approach that?
So I love that you were just so honest about that. And that's actually, it's so true. And especially as women, I deal with a lot of men that are in very high positions, superintendents of county parks, state parks. And I mean, I deal with amazing women too that are in the same positions, but real authoritative figures. And for me, I had a really, growing up, my stepdad was really, to speak honest, very, very, mean. And so it was always like, I learned quickly how to sort of fit in with any personality, especially a strong male personality. Yeah. And I do think that it's really helped me with my job. And I am not there to ever try to challenge. It's just, we just want to put on well-organized trail races. Yeah. And it's also helped me to understand their position. They have, if anything goes wrong, it's on their shoulders. If there's a catastrophe, if whatever happens, it's going to come down on them from people that are above them. So I always try to remember that. And that's helped me a lot with anybody in a position that can be authoritative or, is authoritative. They're just worried about their job, and they're just worried about someone that's, their authority and what they have to lose. So I always just try to remind myself of that and to not ever make my own rules. You follow the rules are the rules. So my assistant, Amanda, who's like my right hand, that's like our joke, because we really have to follow all the rules. When you're putting on big events in all these different entities, the rules are the rules, and there isn't any gray area. It's black or white with them. So yeah, I guess that's probably the best way. Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually really helpful. Well, you ran your first marathon in 2004. How did you decide to do this?
So for me, it was just a challenge from some friends that I used to work out with at the gym. And at first it started with, let's run a half marathon. And I'd still at that point was running, but I had never ran anything more farther than a half marathon. And then one of them was like, we should just run the first inaugural OC marathon. Like, why don't we run a full marathon? And I was like, let's just do it. So we just started training together, and it stemmed from that. Yeah.
How has your training evolved from that first race to what you do now?
Oh, goodness. That's such a big question, because I mean, I still run like 50, 60 miles a week. I mostly run on my own. Like I said, it's my mental medicine time. It's my me time. I only run on trails, but I definitely don't compete anymore. And when I first got into running and the years following that, it was all about competing. And so it's shifted entirely from that. Yeah. For me, it's really for the love of being outside in the wilderness. I'm 48. I love that I'm still so fit. I ran 10 miles this morning.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So that's really, it's shifted. It's a very different goal now. Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy because my husband, like I said, he's done marathons and stuff like that. When he's training, I'm like, there's so much that goes into it, like how to eat and running and heart rate and all this stuff. And it's funny because like I tried pickleball for the first time and I tore my Achilles. No. And I was like, okay, I understand that's barely even running. That's just like a quick little runs. And I was like, okay, now I respect all types of running in every form now. But so I understand why you have to train that way. But I read in an article during your early years of race building that you had a lot of doors slammed in your face, which kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. But how did you overcome this? And what was some of the resistance that you were experiencing?
So when I was first starting out in this sport, ultra marathon races used to be so much smaller. It was such a smaller scale. So you have to, for people to understand, this was back in like 2007, 8, 9. And the sport was a very, very different sport then. Oh. It's just booming now. And it's really like great. It's so wonderful. I love it. But it was just on a lot smaller scale. So for me, I really wanted to put on super well organized races, and I wanted to make it a business. I knew that if it was if I had a staff and people were getting paid and they would care more. And I cared. I genuinely cared. I wanted to change the sport. I wanted to put on super top notch, well organized races. And that was missing. That wasn't happening back then. You saw it in marathons and Ironmans, and it was missing in the sport of trail running. So that was just my absolute goal. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. When did you start trail running?
I started trail running when I trained for my first marathon. So like 2003, I lived in Laguna Niguel at the time, and there was a really pretty trail by my house. And I just started running on the trail because it was prettier. And we would go from our gym at 24 Hour Fitness in Ocean Ranch and cut over to the trail. And when everyone else was like, just wanted to do the training that was, in the schedule, I was like, well, I want to run farther. Like, why don't we just go 20 miles? And so for me, it started with the marathon training and running on the trail and falling in love with trail running, just like instantly. Yeah.
For non-runners like myself, what is the difference between, like, why do you love trail running versus just running on the street?
I mean, I don't want to knock street running by any means. I'll definitely sometimes run on the street to get to a trail. But I think that the one thing about trail running that is the best part about it is it really brings you to the space that you're in that moment in time. You're making sure you don't trip on rocks. You're being aware of your surroundings. The views are usually beautiful, and it takes away from everything else that you could possibly be worried about. And I used to say all the time, like, going for a run, like, kind of clears your head. But if you go for a long run or you run 100 miles, it clears your soul. It's crazy what, or even a 50-mile run. And I know that that's so far for most people, but even just this morning, I was on the trails for 2 hours, and it's like my mind and everything mentally, physically, I'm just so cleared in a good way. And that's what I love about trail running. It just puts you in that moment and takes you away from all the other noise while you're out there. Yeah.
That's so nice. Yeah. Cause I do Pilates and spin. It's only 45 minutes. So it doesn't really, I guess, like flush out everything that you can mentally. My husband does trail running, and he'll be gone for hours. And I'm like, what do you like? That's crazy to me. But the pictures he shows me are gorgeous. And he gets up at like 5 a.m. and I'm like, I don't have anything in my life that would get me up that early. So good for him. But anyway, so in 2007, you started volunteering at races, and you helped at the Leona Divide 50 mile, which proved to be very fortuitous in your career. So can you explain what happened?
Yeah. So I had volunteered in 2007. And then in 2008, the race director, she was in her 60s at that point. She had asked me to be volunteer coordinator. And then in 2009, she said, we basically don't want to do this anymore, and we want to gift you this race. And I had already been in that space of really wanting to create and put on races and basically take races to the next level in the sport, up the game. So it had been in my heart, and I was already manifesting it, because anything you want in life, you can manifest. And so I was there in that space mentally. And then lo and behold, she's like, we just want to give you this race that had been around for like 15 years. And so it all started from there. And then everything else, all the other races I've had and I've built from the ground up, but it all started with Leona Divide. Yeah.
Wow. So what did you see in the races? Like, what potential did you see that you wanted to expand upon? Like, and how have you done that?
So, I really felt like there needed to be a upscale of professionalism, as far as course markings and aid stations, and they used to be such a small scale, and you would kind of show up and somebody would just stand at a trailhead and say, go. And I was like, why can't I didn't want to be at the level and scale of, so to speak, like an Ironman, but I just wanted to have organization and give people in return the money that they're paying for those race entries. And that was really where it stemmed from, my own experience running ultra marathons for the first few years. And it wasn't necessarily the best experience, just sort of, the markings weren't great. It was just, kind of, and I thought we have to do a better job. Like, why can't we do better? And so it was from that. Yeah.
I'm so glad that I got to go to one of your races and like experience it, because my husband was saying like you guys had stations where you had snacks and like water ready to go. And like he was saying like those moments like pumped him up with like all the cheering. And then when he came at the end, like I said, you guys had a massage table all set up and it was free. It was so nice. And then there's like chili being made and like sandwiches ready to go. And like, it was just, so I totally understand what you mean by the level of professionalism. It's a whole event.
Yeah. And what a lot of people might not understand is, like, especially with ultra marathons is, so at races, there are aid stations about every 5 to 7, 8 miles. And those aid stations have water and food and drop bags for runners, like their own drop bags with their own stuff. And if there's, options for crews, like if you wanted to go meet him at one of those checkpoints. And I really think that's what embodies us and makes us such a close family in this sport, is that all the people at those aid stations are volunteers. And most of those people are ultra runners or family or friends of runners. And it's like this 6 degrees of separation in our sport. And everybody just kind of loves everybody and nobody cares, anything, like no judgments. Everybody just, they'll fill your water bottles. They love you all the same. And it's a really great sport. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think attracts, like after what we talked about, what do you think attracts runners from around the globe to come to your races?
Oh, one thing I do have to say, which you went to Ray Miller, and I own and put on all of those races in the Malibu sector. So that's Sean O'Brien, Malibu Canyon Trail Races, Ray Miller, and the coastal views and the weather. I mean, it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
We're so lucky. I mean, that's the coolest thing about Southern California is the weather. You can't beat it. And so a lot of my races, like Ray Miller, we tend to usually have, it might be a little chilly, but it's like sunny and 62. And, in the Midwest or in the middle of Wisconsin, it's probably not the same temperatures in the middle of December. So I think people come from all over for that kind of vibe. It's just, ocean views, good weather. Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. And speaking of your races in LA, you worked to get approval from LA City Council for the Griffith Park Trail Half Marathon, which was the first race to ever be approved in that park's history. What about Griffith Park made you want to host a race there?
So interestingly enough, I have a dear friend. His name's Sean O'Brien. I have a race in Malibu named after him. And we used to run early mornings, like once a month. He lives near Griffith Park. And I used to run with him and a couple of our other friends. And I always just was like, man, I mean, this is the crown jewel of Los Angeles. And I didn't live in LA. I mean, I'm born and raised in SoCal, but I'm an Orange County girl. And I was like, the Hollywood signs here. There's like 45 miles of trails. Why is there not a trail race in this park? Yeah. And he was like, oh, I can't even imagine. I've never heard of that. You should go to the parks. And when I first went to the parks, they literally like pretty much slammed the phone down on me. I called the office, the ranger office, and they were like, absolutely not. And I thought, why is it such an absolutely not? Like, why? Right. And so I just kept pushing buttons and finding my way, and found my way to Tom LaBonge, who has since passed away. But he was Council District 4, and he helped me. He used to hike in the park all the time. And he's like, I think this is so cool. I want to help you. And so he connected me with the LA City Council. And from there it was, a go. So yeah.
That's so cool. So can you see the sign like when you're in the race, the Hollywood sign?
You can. Yes. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. You run on a trail that gets called 3 Mile Trail, and it wraps up and around. And I mean, you can see it on the side, and and you could see the observatory and so many cool things. And you actually run down from the Riverside Trail onto North Vermont Trail. Right there's a Greek theater. It's so iconic. It's really cool. Yeah.
Oh my God, I want my husband to do that one. I want to be a spectator there. That sounds nice.
Yeah. And we have all distances there. Just like, I have a slew of races in Orange County and all of the OC parks. And we offer from 10Ks up to ultra marathon distances. So anybody can participate. Yeah, for sure.
How many miles is a 10K?
6.2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And we get a lot of hikers because we have longer distances. So there's not really cutoffs. So it's great. So everybody can try. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, you've won several races, including 2 100-mile races. I cannot imagine. Take me back to crossing the finish line the first time you won.
It's been a long time. I think it's just one of those things that when you work so hard, and I trained so hard for those wins, it's like finally your guard is let down, and it's like such a huge, it's self gratification. You work so hard and train so hard. So it's like all of your hard work is paid off. Yeah. So really it's just a feeling of overwhelming joy. Yeah.
When you're running how long does a 100-mile race take?
So it depends because there's all different types of hundreds. The hundreds, let's see, I won Angeles Crest 100-mile twice and then Chimera 100-mile. Those were all in the mountains. So very, very rugged mountainous terrain. So it takes a little longer. But which I was never good at. I would never be good at. There's some like flatter, faster 100-mile courses. And there's people that will run those in like the top people in our sport in like 13, 12 hours, 14 hours, like running 7.5-minute miles the whole time.
Oh,
and they are absolutely the most incredible athletes. So the terrain can vary. Yeah. So it just depends. Mine were always like 23 hours, around that 22, 23 hours because it's through the mountains. So, and I was never super, super fast. I was just super resilient and a really good power hiker, and I could keep it moving. So like I'd be at the aid station super fast and I just kept going. I never, so yeah, it worked for me.
Is it mostly like mental strength? Like what's going through your mind at like mile 30? Like you're not even halfway.
Yeah. That was the part that I loved the most about it was that when you're out there, you're making sure that you don't go to the mental well. And always having control of that. And it's that self-talk. Really, the best ultra runners in the sport are the strongest, minded people I've ever met. Nothing can waver them when they're out there. And when you're out there, if you have anything, we used to always say before you start a 100-mile race, especially a 100-mile race, check your bags at the door. Do not bring anything that's whatever's going on in your life. Check it, leave it, and start that race because it'll come out during the race. And, most of the time when you DNF, which is did not finish, it's usually because you're losing control of that kind of mental edge. But it's really a mental game. So if you're super well trained and then mentally strong, you can become in my humble opinion, you can become one of the better ultra runners in the sport.
Wow. Cause in my mind, I just thought people just must be like built a certain way to be able to sustain that type of running, but it's just training and mental exercises essentially.
I think so. Yeah. It's super healthy diet. It's I know many people that are in the sport that didn't run in high school and college and all that stuff like myself. And they didn't have an athletic background and they're incredible ultra runners. And they're just super disciplined and eat healthy and kind of the whole gamut. And they train hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, since you're a nutritionist, what are some of your tips? Like I'm very much on TikTok and I see stuff that's like, you need 1 gram of protein per pound of body fat or body weight, whatever, something absurd. But like, what are your tips on how to, train for one of these?
Oh, I love that question. And, I do have to honestly say, like I said, I'm 48 and I feel good every day. I either go to the gym for a couple hours or I go run for a couple hours. And I don't take naps. I really believe I've lived a very healthy life. And the biggest thing that I would tell people is that just to eat clean, don't eat garbage. And for me, I still look at the back packages of anything I buy. And most of the time it's not in a package. So we eat big salads every night. And I do want to say I support all diets, if you are a vegan or, not a vegan or whatever works for you is what works for you, as long as you're doing it in the most clean and healthy manner. And I think people complicate it. It's also interesting because like you said, TikTok, and there's so much information out there now. And these fads, it's like every time I turn around, there's some new green powder and some new supplement. And it's like, it can be so overwhelming. And something that I've always done, and my husband is, he's been running ultra marathons, not quite as long as I have, but pretty much. And he just won the Moab 240, not this last October, but the October before. And he's he's a rock star. At 52, he raced my Casper's 50K this Saturday and got second. So,
wow.
Yeah. So he's someone too. I always feel like he's been my guinea pig, and we both are huge believers in clean eating. Loads of fruit. Anybody that tells you that fruit has sugar, please don't listen to that. Organic fruit's good for you. Tons of vegetables. I'm a huge believer in organic grass-fed meats. But if you don't eat meat, that's okay. Just make sure you are getting the protein. But I also am a big believer in like green powder. I love Vita Mineral Green. I've been taking it. It's just a green powder that you get from Mother's, the grocery store. And I love it. Athletic Greens is another really good one too. So that's something I take every day. Vitamin D is a really good one. So yeah, I think just like eating clean. It's not that hard, and balance. Like it's okay to go out on the weekend, and if you have a date night or, whatever, like it can't absorb your whole life.
Right.
Yeah. I think people get too extreme, and, it's like you got to have a little balance, but yeah.
I love that. Well, can you share a bit about your experience with adrenal fatigue and also explain what that means? I saw it on in an article that you talked about.
Yeah. So I can be a very good person or a representative of, don't overtrain. And so for me, now it's been such a long time since I've had any adrenal issues, but, after many years of racing competitive ultra marathons and running like 100 miles a week, it basically just caught up to me. And it's a good reminder. I think that it affects a lot of like younger people in their 20s and 30s, because it's like full send every day. And especially in the athletic world, it is a thing. You can overtrain and you can run your body into the ground. And there's not a supplement or anything that you can take. It's really just the body's never meant to, go full send and train like, 30 hours a week on top of life stress.
Right.
So yeah. And for me, I think it was, I've moved on from, in the younger years, it was the perfectionist syndrome and just always striving to be perfect and win. And so it was just overtraining and years of it. And when I was forced to take a step back and kind of heal myself, that's when I made the decision to not really go back my body wouldn't really let me for a few years, to go back to competitive racing. And then once I got past it and, fully healed, it was like, wow, I was able to look and see, how much I was overtraining. And during those years, I had many people that were mentors that were telling me that. And, you don't listen when you're young. It's like, but no, I have to do this. I have to do this. And I think there's a lot of professional athletes that suffer from that. Yeah.
Definitely. I interviewed, sorry, go on.
I was gonna say it's a thing. Yeah.
I interviewed Courtney Conlog, and she talked about an injury that she had. And she was saying she was almost like grateful for that period of time because it gives you a lot of time to reflect on things. And at the time that I was interviewing her, I was actually healing from my Achilles injury. And boy, does it give you time to reflect on things, because the initial doubt or denial that I felt when I was told like, oh, you can't exercise for 3 months, you can't walk on it, you can't do all these things. And I was like, no, that can't be true. Like, it's not that bad. And then you realize, no, it's just going to prolong it. If I try to do any of these things, I just really have to take a step back. So in addition to, taking a step back, what were some of the things that you learned during that time?
Well, it was really interesting because during that time, my business was just starting to kind of build and explode. And so I was sort of in the depths of those low moments of my healing, like in 2014, 15. But then I had this incredible little business that was growing. And I realized that it was really the universe telling me, no, you need to put your energy here. This is what, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because at the time there was nothing other than my sport and being competitive and racing. And I was so imbalanced and, like I said, chasing that perfectionism. And so for me, it was the best thing that ever happened. And then I was able to be fully present to grow my business. And if I wouldn't have had, those small health issues, I would have never been like taken away from that and been, able to slow down and put, what was important in front of me. So yeah, it was all meant to be.
Right. So true. Well, what advice do you have for someone like me who dislikes running very much, but has never really given it a try? Like when I hear all these amazing things about the benefits of it mentally, physically, and the addiction seems so real. So what, like I would love to do it, but I just, every time I do it, I'm like, I hate this. I hate this. I hate this. So what advice do you have for someone like that?
Well, that's interesting. So I would say, first of all, that's okay that you feel that way. And I love that, like you said, you do Pilates and yoga, and those things are so incredibly amazing. But if somebody really wants to still try to run a little, I always say just start with a mile. I think we put so much pressure on ourselves, and it's like I have to go run 5 miles. And if someone were to walk into our podcast right now and say, okay, ladies, play a flute right now, play a flute. I'd be like, what are you talking about? I've never played a flute in my life. And so we forget that's the same with anything in life.
Right.
And so if you want to start running, and probably we would hate it. Trying to play the flute would be embarrassing.
Right. It'd be frustrating.
And we just forget that we should take everything in life like that. It's like, why can't we just take it one day at a time? Why can't we just take it one step at a time? So start with a mile, and then the next day run, or, a mile and a half, and then 2 miles, and just gradually each week add a little bit. Don't add 4 miles, add another mile. And then the next week, add a half mile. And you just slowly build up. And before you know it, a few months have gone by, and it's like, oh my gosh, I just ran 10 miles, on a Saturday. Wow. So that's my advice. Yeah.
Honestly, that really inspired me. That does sound like more like putting it in the context of it's a skill. It's not like, cause you think, oh, I can walk, I can run. Like I should be able to do it, and I should why isn't it clicking for me? But that makes so much more sense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at one point when we were little, we had to learn how to run. We didn't just start running. We walked, and then we learned how to run. It's a skill. Yeah. And all of your, every cell in your body has to learn how to adapt to that, how to sweat right, your organs. I mean, you're doing something that you haven't done.
Yeah.
And so people forget that. Yeah. It's hard. Running's hard.
It's working really hard.
Yeah, it totally is. Yeah. I can go for a bike ride because I do like to ride my bike, and I'll go ride my bike for a few hours and I'm like, and I go run for a few hours and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, how can listeners participate in one of your races?
So the way to start would be with a short distance. So definitely, start with the 10K. And you can go to KHRaces.com. Most of our races offer a 10K, and that would be the best place to start. And remember, it's okay to hike. Like people forget that too. And you have all the time in the world. So I would say start with that. If you've never done one of my races and never ran farther than like a 5K, start with a 10K and maybe pick one that's a few months out. There are now in every single city, county, town run groups. So if you just go to Instagram, put in the community where you live. I mean, even down to Orange County, like Ladera Ranch has their own run group. Coda de Caza has their own run group. So neighborhoods are now and join the run group. They're free. And so that's another great tool, and start there. And then just, work your way up. Yeah.
Yeah. My husband does the McKellar Run Club too, which is fun because I think their slogan is like a running club or a beer club with a running problem or something like that. Yeah.
So fun.
Yeah.
There's so many great run groups out there right now. A boom like I've never seen. So it's a great opportunity for listeners. That's where I would start. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, the cute shoes too are going to pull me in, but,
for sure.
So do you have any upcoming races or anything exciting that you would like to shout out?
Well, we have Ray Miller in a couple weeks.
Oh, you're great. Oh my God.
I know. And it'll be our 14th year, 14.
Oh, congratulations.
Something like that. Yeah. So that's super exciting. And I just signed up for a 50 mile in March. in Arizona, and I haven't done that distance in a while, but I thought it's hard for me because the way I explain it to people, like if you were to leave your job, when I'm at a race, I feel like I'm kind of still working because in our small ultra running community, people know me and they want to talk about my races and and so it's hard for me to kind of escape. And nobody wants to leave their job and then be back at their job when they're doing their hobby. So I'm kind of in a unique position. Right. It's why I probably don't race a lot and I just run alone. Not that I don't love my runners, but I did sign up for a 50-mile Old Pueblo in Arizona, and I'm going to make my husband pace me for the last 25. So I guess that's kind of, I don't know. We have so much fun. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so exciting. I'm sure it's going to be gorgeous too.
Yeah.
Well, we are coming to the end of our time, but before I let you go, I have 3 final questions for you that we call the Thoughtful 3. So first of all, what moment in your career are you most proud of? I feel like we don't really get to boast about ourselves as much. So
I would say the resilience of coming back from fires. So I've had where we've had races scheduled and 2 weeks before the entire race course burned. And I mean, that happened at Leona and that also happened at Ray Miller. And really, I'm so proud of how resilient I am and learning to bob and weave. And it's really helped me have the perspective of everything is solvable, anything in life. And what's stressful right now or what you think the world's coming to an end and 6 months from now is not going to matter. So I'm really proud of how I've learned to handle stress. I really don't get that stressed anymore. And I kind of let things I go with the flow a lot more. So yeah.
That is, I need to take a note out of your book. How has your views on leadership evolved over time?
I would say definitely it's learning I definitely don't micromanage and I have a great team. And really the best thing that I've learned through leadership is letting other people lead and giving them the love and confidence to do that and trust. So I have some key important aid station captains that work all my races and they're amazing and wonderful and I trust them. And that's been the best thing I've learned through all my years of being in a leadership role is letting other people lead and not thinking that I have to micromanage that. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. And then lastly, what mantra do you live by or what do you tell yourself when you're running and it starts to feel really challenging?
I'm such a believer in, like I said, manifesting, and I'm constantly telling myself, what you focus on, what you speak about, what you speak to others about, what you worry about, what you think about, it becomes your reality. Mm-hmm. And so for me, my mantra, I'm always telling myself, like, anything is possible, all things are good, and just gratitude. When I'm out running, I'll go through like 10 things I'm thankful for. And, big mantras for me are like gratitude. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm out here. I'm alive. I have 2 legs that are working. I can see these views. I have a beautiful, wonderful husband. Always finding the good, because you can always find the bad, but why not always find the good? And so that's sort of my life. That's my life motto. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. My therapist similarly told me, he was like, think of like your mental state as an outfit that you're picking out. So he's like, manifest essentially how you're going to feel that day, how you're going to feel going into something that's challenging as you would pick out an outfit. So it's like,
I love that. Yeah. And a gratitude journal. I'm big on that. I try to write in it, a few days a week and I'll start writing like 20, 30 things I'm grateful for. And they're just simple things. And then before I know it, I'm like on to 50 things. And so that's really changed my life too. Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to try that. That's a really good tip.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I had so much fun getting to talk with you. My husband's going to be so jealous that I got to have this conversation.
Oh, thank you, Chelsea. I really appreciate it.
Of course.